My name is Larry Hott, and I'm on the board of Mass Humanities. I'm a longtime documentary filmmaker, and I'm also a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, also known as the Oscars. I've been reviewing films for the Academy Awards for more than 30 years, and this year I noticed that several documentaries are about threats to democracy in countries other than the United States. In a year celebrating our Declaration of Independence, it's helpful to see how the ideals expressed in that document and our Constitution are reflected and challenged in other places. I'm going to talk about 4 films that relate to that idea. The first is Democracy Noir, directed by veteran documentary filmmaker Connie Field. Democracy Noir is about Viktor Orban's systemic 15-year destruction of Hungary's democracy. And just like the other films I'm going to talk about, this film is a cautionary tale for the United States.
I think I have identified the real big threat for humanity. It's unhinged, uncontrolled men. Viktor Orban, he's unchecked by the media, he's unchecked by the justice system, which he controls, he's unchecked by his party, who would never vote him out of power, he's unchecked by the opposition, who he threatens, and he's unchecked by the Hungarian people, who he lies to.
It lays out the problems that happen when you let a democratically elected president take over all the levers of government. Democracy Noir traces a chronology of events in Hungary through 3 people, a nurse, a TV journalist, and a politician. And they're all women, and I don't think that's any coincidence. What the filmmaker is saying is that this sector of society, the women in Hungary, is affected even more by Orban's oppression than men. The scene I found the most disturbing was the forced closing of the country's largest newspaper. One of the characters in the film is a journalist who works for a muckraking journal, and the staff is locked out one morning by the police. And the point here, says the journalist, is that the government can now brainwash the population with impunity. The warning in this film is how easily propaganda, covert policy, outright lying, elimination of publicly supported media, the weaponization of religion, and homophobia can subvert democracy. The filmmaker, Petra Costa, takes an entirely different approach in her film Apocalypse in the Tropics.
This city was designed as a vision of Brazil's future. And the cement that held it together was a faith, not in God, but instead in the equally abstract ideas of progress and democracy.
She makes the argument that democracy in Brazil is challenged by its addiction to Christian fundamentalism. What's really both disturbing and fascinating is the influence of the United States on Brazil, specifically the influence of Billy Graham. Billy Graham, the famous evangelical minister, comes to Brazil 50 years ago and begins to broadcast his brand of televangelism. His influence grows and grows and eventually helps the rise of the right-wing president Jair Bolsonaro. The core of the film is the challenge to Bolsonaro from the left by Lula da Silva, who eventually wins the presidency in 2022. This creates a crisis familiar to the one in the United States, when Bolsonaro refuses to concede and his followers attacked and vandalized the halls of Brazil's congressional building. Petra Costa's narration is hypnotizing. She approaches the subject like an anthropologist, or maybe it's more like an archaeologist, because she's digging through layers of Brazilian society and pointing out the 3 key ingredients of the power dynamic: the lure of money, the lure of celebrity, and the lure of power. One reviewer called this an unholy trinity, and this is happening everywhere, of course, and the US is no exception. The takeaway message is that you can save your democracy if you are united, and you continue pushing and don't give up. And the message of the Democracy Noir film is to be really careful. You must protect your media more than anything else, because that's where citizens get their information. You have to be ready, because if your media is shut down, there will be no way to get the truth out to your citizens. The third film, the documentary Narita, centers around the Mothers of Plaza de Mayo, a human rights group composed of mothers protesting the military junta in Argentina starting around 1976 and advocating for the return of their disappeared children.
In Argentina, the military was trained to intervene in political life, but then this coup was different.
Tengo uno de mis hijos desaparecido desde el 15 de abril de 1977.
Tienen que tener todos desaparecidos con vida porque así se los llevaron.
Narita, directed by Jason McNamara and Andrea Tortonesi Carbonato, follows the story of Nora Morales de Cortinas, known as Narita. She died recently at the age of 94. The story is familiar in some ways. We've seen similar narratives in Argentinian feature films, such as The Official Story and The Secret in Their Eyes, or in Brazil with the Oscar-winning film last year, I'm Still Here. After a military coup in 1976, Argentina has a brutal military dictatorship. Anti-communist death squads pick up and disappear young activists, including Narita's son, Gustavo. Narita is inspired by her missing son's idealism and anti-fascist goals. She becomes a human rights activist and a leading figure in social rights movements. Her resilience is inspiring and a testament to her will and determination. As a grandmother and a tireless activist, she takes risks that are hard to imagine. The scenes of the prisons where Gustavo was held are difficult to watch. Particularly compelling is the testimony of a woman, a former prisoner of the regime, and the same age as Narita's son, who survived the torture. The film uses scenes of the mothers protesting, holding photos of their missing children, which is powerful, especially when you learn how they died, some by being tossed from helicopters and airplanes into the sea. The film ends with justice being served, in a way, as the regime eventually changes and some of the perpetrators are convicted and jailed after televised tribunals. The tribunals give us hope that the same kind of justice will come to other lawless regimes. Adhering to the rule of law is a key element of a functioning democracy and a theme that runs through all these films. This is particularly evident in filmmaker Jonathan Jacobowitz's film Soul of a Nation, which is about the schism in Israeli politics.
That's right. Yeah.
75 years since Israel's independence, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets to protest.
In the door through the corridors, touching to the left. I'm just a man that wants revenge and I confess. I am full of rage and sin, locked inside this cage again.
Jacobowitz is from Venezuela, and that's important. He had to flee that country and now lives in Europe. The inspiration for this film, he told a reporter, is that his mother moved to Israel 15 years ago, and this is what he said about his mother recently. From the beginning of 2023, something shifted in the way she was talking about Israel. For many years, all she spoke about was how happy she was, how everything was great. Then suddenly she started talking about politics in a way that reminded me of what we lived through in Venezuela, which was a society so divided by politics that we ended up completely destroying the country. That conversation with his mother was the inspiration for the director's film shoot in Israel in the spring of 2023. He finishes filming and leaves the country just 1 week before October 7th, the day of the Hamas attacks. He speaks with at least 24 Israeli leaders on all sides of the issues, former prime ministers, Palestinian activists, soldiers, you name it. A lot of the film concentrates on the battle over Supreme Court reform. The reform proposed by Netanyahu and other conservatives would take away much of the court's oversight power. This sparked huge demonstrations and a giant split in the unity of the country, a unity that may have never been there in the first place. But nothing in this film is in a vacuum. In a sense, the film is a snapshot of the country just before the October 7, 2023 attack by Hamas. So Jacobowitz's retelling of Israel's decision to pull the Israeli settlements out of Gaza in 2005 and the strife that followed is a harbinger, or maybe an omen, of the rending of society nearly 20 years later. The film is a warning for democracies elsewhere about how deep divisions make countries weaker and more susceptible to attacks from both outside and within.